Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Christy, and this is a continuation of the video previous to this one of Dead by Daylight, the video game Survivors. So for those of you who caught the last actual video that I did, I went from the new survivors Leon and Jill from Resident Evil, and I made it all the way to Bill, the guy that, runs around smoking a cigarette. So I wanted to continue on today with more of our survivors and reading their backstories. Let's see. I got all the way to Bill, and I think the next, if I wasn't mistaken, was Kia, and I think I accidentally clicked over to her on the last video. So let's go and see. There's Bill. All right, it is. It's Nia. Sorry, I called her Kia. Anyway, so again, for those of you who haven't seen the first video, go to the one before this, and this is just a continuation of the survivors of Dead by Daylight. Thank you for coming back and hanging out with me. I do appreciate that. Super, super nice of you. All right, so this character is Nia Carlson. Her difficulty is intermediate. Miss Nia's backstory is she grew up in a small town of Hojo in Sweden. She had a happy childhood, even though her mom and dad worked hard. As the opportunity to move to the U.S. became a reality, she started acting out. Nia was forced to leave her friends and life behind. Nia shieled away from what her parents considered normal. Instead, she took refuge in skate parks, and her tag, Mashtix, was seen more or less all over her new hometown. Nia made a sport out of tagging government buildings, avoiding the fuzz, and any other danger with her nimble cat-like abilities. Finally, Nia's parents became used to her disappearing for a few days on end. She may have gone too far when her friends dared her to tag the old Crotuspren asylum one moonless night, because she was never seen again. That sucks. I don't really get to play as her much, but she seems like she'd be a lot of fun, and she seems like she's a real, rebel. Okay, let's move on. This is Mr. Jake Park. He is intermediate when it comes to his difficulty. Some of these don't have chapters. They just basically come from the creators of Dead by Daylight. So Mr. Jake Park, growing up the son of a wealthy CEO, he was always going to put pressure on Jake. When his brother graduated with honors from Yale, the pressure on Jake intensified. Jake wasn't just the academic type, but his father never really understood his refusal to embrace the expensive education he lavished upon him. Eventually, Jake rebelled by dropping out of school entirely. Now Jake's life off the grid on the edge of the woods. It's been years since he spoke to his father, but his mother checks in once in a while. She was who eventually called the police. The cop said he got lost in the woods and a search party looked for days, but gave up as bad weather rolled in. Despite the passionate pleas from his mother, they never resumed the search, and Jake went down in history as another casualty of the woods. Oof, I can't imagine. That would just be awful. So he's got a lot of really, really good perks like Iron Will. Calm Spirit, Alright, so we'll move on to the next one. This one is the one that a lot of people use because she's got a really good perk called Self-Heal or Self-Care. And this is Miss Claudette Morrill. And her difficulty level is easy, but her teachable perk, Self-Heal, is definitely one of those things that a lot of people need when it comes to playing Dead by Daylight. Because when you get smacked by a killer or stabbed by the killer, it's always good to be able to heal yourself, especially if you don't have any items to bring in order to heal yourself. So let's go over Miss Claudette's backstory. From the day that her parents gave Claudette her first science kit, she loved experiments. Her single-minded pursuit led to an early scholarship at a great college. It was a huge decision to leave Montreal, but the chance was too good to pass up. Her introverted nature meant that chat rooms and forums were now her best source of social interaction. Her new favorite activity was to answer botany questions for others under the monkeyer of Science Girl. One evening, during a long bus ride back from the city, Claudette took a stroll that would change her life. It only took a minute for her to get completely disoriented in the thick woods. She never found her way back. Her forum only started to wonder where she was a week after she stopped posting. That is just so sad, because she is a really good character. It seems like she had a good head on her shoulders too. Alright, moving on to Meg Thomas. difficulty easy. I didn't know that. Meg was actually one of the ones that I started as my main when I played the game because I really like pigtails, but kind of went over to a couple other characters just because they're easier to work with. Okay, so Meg's backstory. Meg Thomas. Perhaps it was her mother that instilled the fierce streak in her, or maybe it was her father that left them when she was a baby. Meg excelled at schoolwork, but she was off the rails. Fortunately, an athletics coach encouraged her to channel her Miss Spirit energy on the track. She motivated herself into becoming a high school star and earned a scholarship to college. When her mother fell ill, Meg decided to give up her chance at college to care for the woman who had raised her. One summer's day, on a long run deep in the woods, Meg vanished. Search as they did, they never found her body. It's because of the entity. It took her up into the sky. Poor Meg. Seems like they all start out okay and they just get kind of lost. Alright, so Mr. Dwight. There we go. Hey, Mr. Dwight, his backstory. He's got a couple good perks too. Not a lot of people use him, but he seems like he does okay. Dwight Fairfield. Dwight was Dwight was geeky and scrawny, though, in high school. He always wanted to be one of the cool kids, but somehow never had the charisma. He tried out for football team, but was cut. The basketball team didn't even take a look, and his grades were distinctively below average. One weekend, on a team building exercise from his dead-end job, Dwight's boss led him deep into the woods before breaking out his family recipe, moonshine. Hey. Dwight remembered taking the first sip before waking up late the next morning, all alone. During the night, the others had abandoned him. Once again, the laughingstock of the community, Dwight tried to hike his way out of the woods. That was the last anyone ever heard of Dwight Fairfield. Wow, that's kind of a messed up way to go, you know? Ugh, poor guy. Alright, so a lot of you know that this is Miss Laurie Strode. She's from the Halloween chapter that they created on Dead by Daylight. She's actually one of the characters that they made from the movie, so I've never read her backstory. Hopefully they kept within her spectrum when it comes to that. Difficulty is hard. So her backstory is you never know what really matters in life until you've realized it might end soon. Laurie is one of those who wants a quiet life in the suburbs, hanging out with friends, family, maybe go on a date or two. Laurie is a typical teenager. You would pass her on the street and not think twice. She does her homework and is liked by her friends, teachers, and family. A simple night of babysitting turns into something that will forever change the curse of her young life. A knife swooshing through the air, screams from afar, noise that plays tricks with her mind. But not Laurie. She's made of something stronger, something that won't give up. So I thought that was pretty cool that they had her as a character here. I thought they could have done a little better with her appearance, but it is what it is. Okay, so this is another easy when it comes to the difficulty. This is Quentin Smith and his backstory. He is actually from A Nightmare on Elm Street chapter, and for those of you who know me know that as much as I love Freddy Krueger, he scares me to death. So here we go. When he heard that Nancy's mother had disappeared, Quentin Smith knew instantly that their success had been short-lived. Although their plan had seemed to work flawlessly, Freddy Krueger had beaten death yet again. But Quentin wasn't about to give up. It might take many attempts, but he vowed that somehow he would find a way to beat Freddy, once and for all. If he didn't, it would only be a matter of time before Freddy would win and Nancy was lost. Somehow, like Quentin never attracted attention in a library, let me reread that. Someone like Quentin never attracted attention in a library, no matter how strange the texts he requested were. He devoured all the information he could on a shared dreams world, lucid dreaming, and the methods to control the dream space. Forcing himself to stay awake via a steady diet of pills and energy drinks, he searched through dusty volumes, finding myths about the demons that lived in dreams, trapping their victims in limbo and feeding off their terror. Well, that doesn't sound safe at all. He worked quickly as he knew that Freddy would soon be coming for him. It wasn't long before that moment arrived, and Freddy began appearing in his dreams. He stayed at the Perforary at first. Perforary? Taunting Quentin, seemingly hoping to tire him out. Using all he had learned, Quentin was able to use flaws in the dream, cracks where escape routes could be formed. He tested the skill carefully, not wanting to show his hand, hoping that it would give him some kind of advantage that he could use to defeat Freddy. Then, one night, he found himself in the familiar environment of Badham Preschool. Freddy had tired of the taunting and had finally decided to gut him. Oof. Quentin ran through the school, his quick eyes scanning for something useful in the maze of rooms. He found a can of paint thinner and quickly formulated a plan. Once the trap was set, he waited, acting as the lure to draw Freddy into the right position, and there he was, claws scraping on metal as he closed in for the kill. Quentin allowed himself time to enjoy the surprise on Freddy's face as the corridor ignited, and then he was away, running through the building, heading for the exit that he knew existed. If he harried Freddy, weakening him and then escaping the dream to safety, surely that would defeat him over time. Before his eyes, the cracks in the dream closed and his escape route was blocked. He was in Freddy's secret room again, and there was nowhere to run. As Freddy closed in, a broad grin spreading across his ruined face, Quentin was consumed by a need to see this man finally obliterated. He wished it had been him, not his father, who threw the gas can that ended Kruger's life. That it had been him who had cut Freddy's throat. Perhaps that desire would be enough. This was a realm of the mind after all. He let it consume him, concentrating all of his thoughts on wishing Freddy gone. His vision was obscured with rolling tendrils of fog, and when it cleared, he was somewhere else, in another dream? If so, it wasn't his. It felt cold and unfamiliar. A flickering drew his attention, and he realized he was by a campfire, and he wasn't alone. Other people were trapped here too, and they needed his help. I don't think I've ever seen anybody play as this guy. Sad. Really, really sad. Alright, so this is Detective Tapp, and he is from the Saw chapter. Some of you remember him from the movies as well. Difficulty intermediate for him. And his backstory. What is his perks? Tenacity, good, detective's hunch, and stakeout. Alright. Detective David Tapp was one of the good guys. His determination to see killers brought to justice and their victims avenged had led him through a long, respected career. When he first saw the details of the Jigsaw case, it seemed like many others, more grisly and macabre? Ooh, okay. There are a couple words I don't know. Sure, but just another lunatic with a penchant for the overdramatic who would soon be behind bars. Okay, so apparently he's a really good detective, and apparently I need to figure out some of these words. A stroke of insight brought Tapp and his partner, Detective Stephen Singh, to an abandoned mannequin factory where they discovered Jigsaw's lair. Ugh, that would just creep me out. Being in an area with a bunch of mannequins, that's really freaky. They apprehended the man, but he managed to escape before being unmasked, slashing Tapp's throat as he did so. Leaving his partner, Singh went in pursuit but fell victim to a booby trap. Tapp had failed to go by the book on this one occasion, entering the lair without a warrant, and it had resulted in a detective's death. He was discharged from the force and left with a ruined throat and crippling guilt. Okay, so I thought he died, but I guess he got his throat hurt, but he didn't die, so that's good. Okay, he channeled that guilt into an obsession. He would find the killer, stop the murders, vindicate himself, and avenge his friend and colleague. Following the evidence trail brought to him to Dr. Lawrence Gordon, and he staked out the doctor's apartment, sure he would find evidence of guilt. Then he saw a stranger at Gordon's window and heard gunshots. Tapp confronted him, and the man fled, with the pursuit leading to an industrial building. Tapp's age caught up with him. A fight that he would easily have won in his younger days ended with Tapp taking a bullet to the chest. Slumping to the floor, he saw only failure. He had failed his partner and the other victims. Whoever the killer was, Tapp had been unable to stop him. More would die, and it would be his fault. He let the rage and guilt consume him and closed his eyes for the final time. Beneath, the concrete floor softened. He dug his fingers into the ground, feeling the dirt and leaves. Where his chest had been wet with blood, the shirt was now dry, and the pain had gone. His eyes opened onto a darkened sky and the jagged, searching fingers of branches. Screams echoed through the forest, and a new determination filled him. His mind was clear for the first time in months. Victims needed to be avenged, killers thwarted. He didn't know what his place was, but he was still a cop, and he always would be. He had a job to do. So he seems like he was really put through the ringer as a character, and he seems like he would actually be, someone good to run with. All right, next one, Adam Francis. I've seen this one played by a friend of mine. Difficulty intermediate. Chapter Shattered Bloodline. Adam was born in Rollington Town in Kingston, Jamaica. His father died in a car accident when he was 2, and his uncle took him in. His uncle was strict but fair man who raised him to value education. At Kingston College, Adam discovered his father's published works, which triggered his passion for literature. His campus, however, was known for its focus on athletics. As a shy teenager with his nose stuck in books, he was a perfect prey for bullies. What he lacked in sports, he made up for in grit. He learned to defend himself in the thick of it. It's during his years in college that he started to imagine his life elsewhere. While his close friends orbited to the music industry, he followed a surer path. His grades granted him admission to higher education, and there was a demand for teachers abroad. I need to slow down to mess up admission. Come on. All right, after graduating university, he taught extra classes to afford applying fees overseas. He had a steady diet of long commutes, grading piles, nightly lesson plans, and early classes. After a year, he managed to apply for a position abroad. His first plane ride took him to southern Japan for a new start. It's actually a pretty good new start, if you ask me. His life in, Kagoshima was hectic. There was little time to do everything he took for granted back home. His Japanese was elementary at best, which slowed him down. Buying groceries took hours. Long commutes had to be planned, and lesson plans relied on Japanese notions, which he had to learn. But after a few months, he found his rhythm. He reflected on it one morning while riding the train to work. He no longer had to study the kanji characters filling the map. He knew his way. His language skills had improved. He felt connected to his students, and he treated himself to luxurious restaurants on weekends. He even had his first vacation planned. Within seconds, Adam's world was brought down to a slow motion. Rails hissed, bags came pouring down, and the floor trembled before the hit. Adam crashed forward as the train flipped upside down. Can you imagine that? Whoa. He landed on a window pane as an unhinged door came flying at a passenger. He rolled over so that the door would hit him instead of the girl. He shut his eyes as he braced for impact, but nothing happened. He squinted one eye open and saw nothing but darkness. A heavy fog had taken over the train. Ice seemed to flow through his body, reaching his lips first, then the tip of his fingers before spreading to his legs. Lulled by the warm hum of the dark whisper, he closed his eyes, drifting. No one truly knows what happened to Adam Francis. The school teachers imagined the worst when they watched a train derailment on the news and saw he was missing. Their fears seemed to be confirmed when Adam's bag was recovered from the crash site, but his body was never found. To this day, his uncle believes that Adam took off after the train crash, alive still, somewhere out there. So his uncle still thinks he's out there, which, I guess technically he is. He's just in the fog. All right, Jane Romero, difficulty intermediate, and she is from Demise of the Faithful chapter. And here is her backstory. Miss Jane Romero was the daughter of a famous actress, Loretta Lawrence, of whom she had no memory. Her parents had separated when she was still a baby, mainly since her mother was often away filming. Jane was raised by her father, a struggling visual artist. She grew up torn between resenting her mother's absence from her life and admiring the presence on screen. As a teenager, Jane secretly wished to emulate her mother's talent. She would direct and perform in plays, audition for TV commercials, and help her father at the studio. During her senior year, she entered a national oratory contest and won first prize. Her performance attracted the attention of a radio station that contacted her for an interview. During the live show, her natural charm and repertoire impressed the staff, who offered her a part-time job at the station. After graduating college in communication, she quit her job at the station to work for a trendy variety show, but her frank delivery and ad-libs were not appreciated by the show's executives, who fired her after 5 months. Desperate for another opportunity, Jane pitched a show to the radio station she used to work at, only to be turned down, her proposal being too risky. 4 months later, she received a phone call from a producer who had seen reruns of the show. He was looking for a co-host to spark up the failing show, Quick Talk. Live television meant long hours, a low salary, and no stability, but it also offered a platform to broadcast her views. She disputed the crude, inflammatory tone of Quick Talk and pushed for a relatable coverage of personal issues. Her honest delivery resonated with her audience, and within weeks, the show's viewership was steadily growing. After 2 years, she launched a full-hour segment called The Jane Ramiro Show, which was broadcast nationally and covered tabooed topics, including her personal struggle with abandonment. Her show broke records, and her initials JR became synonyms with projects ranging from beauty creams to fashion accessories. But Jane needed more. She wanted others to follow in her footsteps. She published a memoir that covered her childhood with an absent mother. Her book was an instant bestseller but was reviewed harshly. Critics called it serving of sad anecdotes seasoned with bland, generic self-help tips. Ouch. Jane took this criticism to heart, since despite her success, a voice in the back of her mind was starting to doubt her achievements. Her success also generated an increasingly demanding schedule and growing pressure to entertain constantly. During a partially tense week, she canned an episode and instead launched a 2-hour-long special on divorce. Whew. Her stress peaked when she learned that her mother had agreed to star in her show. Can you imagine? What? Jane put on a brave face and began the show, most of it without a hitch, but her mother walked on set, smiling warmly at the audience. Jane's stomach lurched unpleasantly. She was consumed by a violent envy and had been festering, yet she carried on with a stranded smile until Loretta interrupted her, saying that they were not actually related. The interview went haywire after that. After the show, Jane was driving to her father's house in New Jersey. She needed to talk things over with him. She had not been feeling like herself lately. She turned on the freeway along to the coast to avoid major congestion and popped some painkillers to numb the throbbing pain in her temples, which had been nagging at her all day. Then she started to relax and turned on the radio. Classical music was playing. The drive was slow. Black ice covered the highway, which was packed with cars on her way home. Night fell. A darkness began to blur the corners of her vision and turn the headlights into swirls of red. Jane blinked to sharpen their outlines, but each time she closed her eyes, her eyelids became heavier and slower until they remained shut for a moment too long. The following morning, authorities were fishing out Jane's car from the water. Despite leading a malicious search for weeks, Despite leading a meticulous search for weeks, they were unable to retrieve her body. The airing and production of the Jane Ramiro Show was suspended until after her funeral, which her father and mother attended. As the public grieved over Jane, there was a surge of orders for JR products, and all her episodes were re-released a month later with an opening credit that wished her eternal peace. Poor thing. Ugh, that sucks. Alright, so this will be our last character for tonight's reading. And this one actually looks like a pretty decent read. And we all know Ashley J. Williams from the Ash vs. Evil Dead chapter. If you haven't watched the movies, they're great. They've got comic relief, and it's definitely a good watch. So he's one of the characters that I noticed too when he's in the loadout. He actually says little one-liners, which I thought was pretty clever, because it just seems like an Ash kind of thing to do. Alright, so his backstory. During a weekend at a cabin with friends, Ashley J. Williams uncovered the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead. Okay. And he awoke something dark in the woods. Evil possessed his friends, whom he was forced to kill, in his right hand, which he sawed off. For the next 30 years, Ash ran from his past, working at a value shop department store and seducing women in dive bars. But he screwed up one night while being high when he read from the Necronomicon to impress women. Is that how you say that? How do you say that? I'm missing a lot of these words. If you know how to write out a pronunciation and you want to do so in the comments, feel free. And I can't believe he was trying to do that to impress women. Anyway, evil found him once more, wrecking the life of those around him. But his co-workers, Pablo, who was raised by a shaman, and Kelly, who was orphaned by the deities, helped him put up a fight. While battling evil, Ash was reunited with his long-lost daughter, Brandy, who encouraged him to embrace his role as a savior of humanity. After a terrible fight with a fully formed demon, Ash, drawing his last breath, was taken by the Knights of Sumeria and transported into the future. Ash awakened to a voice, his head throbbing. Since defeating a gang of deities a week ago, he had been in a perpetual state of hangover. Oof, yikes. He heard the voice once more, a woman singing, sensual and inviting. Stepping into the corridor into his boxers, he strode toward the voice, which led to a public locker room. As Ash pushed open the door, the singing stopped. There was a rustling of curtains. He called out, entering the change room. His voice reverberated on the moldy tiled walls. Ew, someone get in there and scrub it down. He pressed on, reaching a shower that was still dripping wet. Cold, human fingers ran down his bare neck. He turned around. A woman stood naked, her skin glistening in the morning light that streamed in from the high windows. Ash recognized her instantly. Linda Emery, one of his former high school flings. They had gotten back together 30 years later while saving their hometown from evil. He had ended their relationship soon afterwards, preferring to indulge freely in his newfound popularity. Linda winked at Ash, who closed the distance between them. He caressed her cheek wistfully. What was she doing here? Did she know anything about the whereabouts of his daughter, and Pablo, and Kelly? A sharp blade dug into his hand, making him jump back. Linda slid a finger across the edge of her blade, collecting Ash's blood on her fingertip. She smiled, and her skin shriveled. Her hair faded, her shoulders stooped, and her curves sagged, aging decades older in a matter of seconds. She attacked Ash, who poorly managed to block, being half naked. Every blow she delivered earned him a new wound. She slashed his bad knee, and he fell to the floor. As she jumped on top of him, Ash shrieked in disgust, knocking the knife out of her grasp. Her varicose hands wrapped around his neck, strangling him. Gasping, he outstretched his arm, landing on a soap dispenser. He spurted out some liquid onto his fingers and poked her in the eyes. The elderly woman winced, weakening her hold, and Ash elbowed her in the face, knocking her back. He rolled over and grabbed the knife off of the floor. Just as he was about to plant it into her chest, he stopped. There was something else. He wanted more. He pressed the blade against her throat. Let's make a deal, demon. In exchange for not killing you, you portal me back to my friends. The demon agreed. She began reciting the incantation, instructing Ash to repeat after her, which he failed to manage. When nothing happened, Ash threatened the demon, who argued back, blaming his poor pronunciation. Their combined exchange of Sumerian words triggered a hiss from the showers behind them. The wet, tiled floor darkened, and the pipes burst. A whirlwind of dirty water showered the curtains, and used toilet paper swallowed the demon, while Ash held on to the locker door, which slowly flipped from his fingers. Oh, or he's saying "fuh"? I don't know. Either way, Ash landed flat on his chest in the realm of the entity, sputtering grass. He got up, brushing off the dry clothes and he suddenly had on. He then looked around, and his grin fell. It was the kind of place that made two things obvious. One, there wasn't any bar for miles, and two, he was going to need a shotgun and chainsaw, both of which he lacked. As he started to walk towards a glinting light ahead, his scream rippled through the trees. Groovy. That's probably when he realizes that he was not in his hometown anymore. Alright guys, I know it wasn't much of a read today. I always forget to bring water. I'm not going to forget that next time. I am going to be moving on to the next character, which will be Miss Nancy Wheeler. We'll touch base on her on the next video. Thank you again for coming to hang out with me. I know these are short and sweet, but it's always nice to hear the backstory of some of the characters that we're playing with. And some of them, even though we've seen them in the movies, it's still really cool to kind of get feel of how they entered into this Dead by Daylight realm. Again, I do really appreciate all of you who come out and hang out with me time and time again over here on the YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out any of the other videos, feel free to do so. And if you'd also like to check me playing Dead by Daylight, you can catch me on my Facebook Live. I'm basically streaming all the time, almost every single day. So if you pop over there and give me a look-see, it's Mama Lee. Don't forget, I'm Christy, and it was nice seeing you guys. Thank you again for coming out, and I will be uploading another video tomorrow with some more readings of some more survivors. Bye for now.